Good morning and welcome to the Kauffman FastTrac Author Series. This is Alana Mueller, President of Kauffman FastTrac, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the next installment of our author series. Today especially, I'm delighted to introduce you to my good friend, Susan Freeman. Susan is the author of Step Up Now, 21 Powerful Principles for People Who Influence Others. I'm sitting here holding my own personalized dog-eared copy, so I hope that you all have had a chance to take a look at it. The book helps motivate high-achieving leaders and influencers to get to the root of what is holding them back and to access the natural leader within. Susan is an accredited coach with the International Coach Federation, and her background includes an MBA from Columbia University, 25 years of strategic marketing, nonprofit, and retained executive search management experience and training in numerous Eastern wisdom practices, including Amrit Yoga, which I know she'll tell you more about today. This unique blend of practical and integrative techniques helps her clients rediscover and evolve their leadership in a balanced, sustainable way to experience passion, clarity, and exceptional results. And with that, I give you Susan Freeman. Susan, welcome.
Thank you. It's just such an honor and a delight to be with you and the Kauffman FastTrac community. Alana, I want to thank you and Kim for making this possible. And I'm really looking forward to our time together today. So I want to dive in and make sure that we cover as much material as I can give you and then allow ample time at the end for your questions. So if you would be gracious enough to please hold your questions until the end, we have slotted in some time for a conversation in the community. The title of my talk today is Inspire, Influence, and Impact, the Roots of Leadership. And the reason that this is so important to me is that I discovered that when I wrote my book, I wrote the book that I wish someone had written for me. And I discovered very early on that you can't solve a problem with the same mind that created it. And that was really the pivotal beginning of my journey, was to understand how it was that the challenges that I and others with whom I had been in relationship as clients had experienced, how we could begin to navigate through the particular challenges of leadership that we were facing in new and effective ways. It's a very personal story. I spent a decade learning how to break through my own barriers, and this allowed me to navigate my career transition successfully, to heal my body, and to handle very challenging family situations with grace and confidence. So what I'm about to share with you is the system that I created that I discovered and now utilize with many of my own clients. The story really is a very interesting one in terms of my own mindset shift. I was spinning the plates in the air of family, work, community service, exercise, and engagement, and just really thought that I had it all until one day I realized that it had all of me. And what I discovered in that process was that I had to literally be stopped almost dead in my tracks in order to poke my head up above the water and begin to ask the questions about what were the roots of what was stopping me from getting where I needed to go next in my own work and in my career. I guess we can all say that life comes in the form of lessons, and I got mine in the form of an accident. I was on vacation in California, and I had a very untoward experience when a scale fell on my foot. And evidently, through the process of the fracture, I ended up with a fairly severe and debilitating chronic pain syndrome that set me on a journey of looking for ways in which I could continue to do the work that I wanted to do in the world while navigating through this very difficult time. And as a result, I began to learn and develop beyond the sort of traditional roots of what had been offered to me medically. I began to explore how could I be in relationship with my own work and my own life in these very difficult times while I was healing. And the outcome of that really is the system that I am presenting to you today that resulted in my book. I want to share with you a little bit about the mission that I aspire to in the work that I do in the world. which is to help motivated, high-achieving leaders who have driven themselves to a crisis point, and they're feeling so worn down and worn out that they are stuck. They literally cannot take another thing. I help them get to the root of what is holding them back, to access the natural leader within, so that their leadership evolves in a balanced, joyful, and sustainable way. And when they do, they experience passion, clarity, and exceptional results. So my intention today is to open the gateway for each of you to a new, broader understanding of leadership, perhaps a deeper understanding of leadership. So I'm going to invite you to be curious, to be open, to put on your learner hats, because some of the things I'm going to share with you may be a bit surprising, and you may not initially be able to see how they might be connected to leadership. And by the end of my presentation, I hope that you will begin to see how directly connected they are and how some of the tools that I'm going to share with you can impact your own leadership. So there are 3 key points that I want to make in our time together today. The first is, remember these 2 numbers, 93% versus 7%. Okay? The second is to rediscover your natural leader and go to the root. And the third is that we are going to learn to access your inner brilliance via a deep relaxation practice. Why is this important? Well, let's take a look at the situation that leaders are facing today. Worker engagement is at an all-time low. Some numbers have estimated it to be as low as 30% in the U.S. and 11% worldwide. 80% of people report they never even use their greatest gifts while at work. 51% of A players are actively looking for another job. And according to a USA Today poll, 1 in 5 workers in the U.S. looks forward to going to work. That means only 20% of us get up in the morning and are energized about what we have to do. Not surprisingly then, the stats for wellness and health reflect that. 75% of all illness is considered to be stress-related or stress-induced. And stress-related concerns account for 75 to 90% of all hospital visits. So the economic impact of these challenges costs our country over $300 billion annually in the United States. So addressing this, getting to the root of this, is not just helpful to us as individuals, but it's helpful to us as leaders, as business owners, and as a society. So how often have you perhaps heard these words? Up or out, publish or perish, make rain, or find another job? Well, perhaps at some point in your careers, you have heard these words. My clients have heard all of these, and this is what I heard constantly. And I began to wonder, what is it that they all seem to have in common? And here's what I understood. I understood that their inner leader was perhaps walking Fido, the dog. Or maybe I should say that Fido was walking them. And Fido stands for fear, insecurity, doubt, and overwhelm. Now on the outside, no one would ever admit that they were walking Fido the dog. But when we began to explore the challenges, the problems, the breakdowns, and how they were showing up in their world at work, it was very apparent to them and to me that some of all of these challenges were being faced by my very successful people. So, what's really going on here? This led me to the next question. If all people who are running businesses or engaged at very high levels of work are challenged with these same issues, what do they have in common and what's really happening? So here's what I discovered. I discovered that for the vast majority of us, we were living in our heads, and it isn't working for us. We were running in a reactive state, which meant that our minds and our brains were actually spending more time living in the past or focusing on the future. We were perpetually distracted by technology. I'm sure many of you can relate to this, which was exacerbating the problem of the first 2 bullets. And as a result of that, we were beginning to experience, and many deeply experiencing, a disconnection from self and from others. Clients were experiencing these, what I call enemies of learning. I need to make money. I don't have the time for that. I can only solve that problem by working more or harder. Or the one I really love, I need to think it through, and then they would end up ignoring the problem altogether. How many of you experience these concerns that limit your effectiveness? Think about it. Just take a moment right now and check off the boxes for the bullets that I've presented that you may find resonant in your world. Because now I'm going to give you the simple answer that you may have been searching for, as I was for many, many years. In fact, 10 years. The truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off. And I love this quote by Gloria Steinem because it really captures how deeply embedded our blindness is to the very things that could really make us effective, powerful, joyful, and essentially liberated. What's missing in leadership? Well, we all know that leadership requires these 5 elements. The ability to set a vision, the ability to set and accomplish goals, drive, effort, and learning, the ability to self-correct and course-correct. But there is one part about leadership that you may not yet have discovered and that I hope today we firmly root in your own understanding. The missing element of leadership, the most fundamental element of leadership, for me, is a strong and centered presence. It's such a fundamental tool that I made it one of the 21 principles in my book, Step Up Now, 21 Powerful Principles for People Who Influence Others. It's such an important foundational element that everything else builds upon this capacity. And as such, I'm going to invite you to experience it for yourselves, because we can talk about this and describe it, and at that point it will only be a cognitive understanding. And what do you remember best? Do you remember best learning how to do geometry or how to ride a bike? Probably it's riding a bike. And it's because riding a bike was experienced with all of you, your entire body. And the geometry was experienced exclusively as a cognitive process. And therefore it could be learned, but it is also easily forgotten if not utilized. So, if you're willing to play, what I'm going to invite you to do now is to move yourselves to the edge of your chairs and plant your feet firmly on the floor. Make sure that your spinal column is erect with each of your vertebrae stacked one on top of the other. This is very important. Begin to soften, roll your shoulders back and forward as you soften them, and release any tension that may have accumulated already, even though the day is still young. And then place your hands firmly by your side or in your lap and close your eyes. Now I'm going to give you an instruction for how I would like you to begin to breathe. And this may be very different than your current pattern of breathing. In fact, I hope it is different, because most people breathe from the top of their lungs most of the time. And this is the shallow breath that consistently promotes fear and anxiety in the body. What we're going to do today is learn to breathe from the belly. So place one of your hands above your abdomen, or on top of your abdomen, excuse me, and focus your attention 2 inches below your navel. This is your center. It is called your dantian. The Chinese believe that it's the center of power in the body. So what we're going to do is we're going to imagine a hole 2 inches below your abdomen, your belly button. And I want you to imagine that you're filling a water bottle from the bottom up. As you inhale through the hole 2 inches below your abdomen will begin to expand. And as you bring the breath up to the lungs, your chest cavity expands as well. And when you get the breath to the top of the lungs, hold your breath. And when you can no longer comfortably hold your breath, release the breath out through your mouth as it goes down through the lungs and out through the hole 2 inches below your navel. Okay, let's repeat. Inhale through the nose as you bring the breath in through the abdomen. The chest cavity expands last. As the chest cavity expands fully to capacity, hold the breath. And when you can hold the breath no longer comfortably, release the breath. All right, one more breath at this pace, slowing the inhalation and the exhalation length. Bring the breath in through the hole 2 inches below your abdomen. And your abdomen expands, and eventually, as the breath comes to the top of the lungs, the chest cavity will expand. Hold the breath at the top of the lungs. And now release the breath back down and out through the hole 2 inches below your abdomen. I'm going to invite each of you to breathe in this way at your own pace. And the invitation is to lengthen the inhalation and the exhalation to be as far apart as you possibly can make them without struggle. It is more important to be relaxed than to be perfect. So continue breathing in this way as I speak and simply respond through your body to my voice. Ask yourself, what am I experiencing right now in my bodily sensations, my emotions, my thoughts? So simply acknowledge and accept your experience, especially elements that are uncomfortable or unwanted. If you find yourself making judgments about your experience, just notice that. Simply observe. Bring your attention to your breath. Notice the rise and the fall of each in-breath and each out-breath. And as your attention wanders and the thoughts come and go, simply bring it back with kindness and patience to your breath. If you find it helpful, you can notice a sense of letting go or sighing on your out-breath. The breath is an anchor to bringing you back to the present moment. And so now, as you expand the field of awareness around your breath, become aware of your facial expressions, your posture, any tension you may be holding anywhere in your body. Notice sensations, feelings, temperature, emotions, thoughts, what's happening in the world around you now. Let go of judgment and simply observe what is happening in this very moment. And now, I invite you to take another deep inhalation through your belly and bring the breath in through the lungs, and at the very top, hold the breath and release it with a sigh. And wiggle your fingers and perhaps wiggle your toes, and very softly and gently open your eyes and return to the here and now. So you may be wondering how long we were in silence. It's roughly about 3 minutes, 3-4 minutes. And I invite you to reflect individually on what you heard, what you perhaps felt. How many of you were perhaps feeling anxious or frustrated? And how many might have been experiencing a feeling of calm and being settled? How many of you were truly here in this moment, or how many of you were somewhere else? Were you thinking about what you were going to have for dinner, or what you forgot to do already today? And then ask yourself, where do I spend most of my waking time? In this moment or somewhere else? You see, for those of you who experienced the calm, centered presence, you went into what we call the no-stress zone, in which there was no thought, no start, no finish, no borders, no shape, no time. In fact, no you. And we describe this experience as becoming the witness and not the judge. Why is this important to you as leaders? I'm going to share with you the first of our numbers. Studies that were done initially at UCLA over 30 years ago, looking at where influence and credibility reside as a factor in leadership, have demonstrated and been replicated to prove that only 55% of our influence and credibility, 55% comes from our body. That is the way we hold our body, our posture, the energy we emit from our body, etc. 38% of it comes from our voice tone and the emotions behind our vocal tone, and 7% from the words we speak. Most leadership training is focusing on the 7%. It's focusing on teaching us how to talk to each other. It's completely missing the 93%. And it's the 93% that matters. You see, your inner reality creates your outer reality. Your inner experience will be reflected in your results. So the fundamental question for leaders who want to go to the root is, how are you being? And who are you being? What does the inner world look like for leaders and influencers? I'm going to ask you that question. Is your inner leader walking with love, security, confidence, calmness? Because it is our birthright to rediscover this leader and to live and lead from this place. You see, we're all leaders. Everyone has a unique roadmap in discovering and rediscovering leadership. We differ in where we start and perhaps our destinations. And we differ in the terrain of our journeys. The way in which you discover it may be very different from the way I discovered it. Yet there are several common elements, and these are the elements that I write about in my book, in the 21 Principles. The system that I have designed focuses on 5 key elements. The first is shifting of the mindset. The second is breaking through the blockages, the barriers that we have accumulated that are stopping us from seeing what is in front. The third is learning new skills to support the creation of new neural pathways. As we all know, neuroscience research is demonstrating that neurons that fire together wire together. So in order to produce new neural pathways, we must consistently fire the neurons differently. That means we must create new habits and practices that support us getting where we want to go, rather than the unconscious habits that keep us stuck doing things that are no longer productive or helping us create the breakthrough results that we deserve to have. And the last piece is, of course, accountability, because in order to sustain the gains, you need to be able to replicate the results over and over again. If all 5 of the elements are present in the system, the new neural wiring is installed, and it becomes the default. This system that I created is a cutting-edge approach based on integration. We've incorporated elements of neuropsychology learning, emotional intelligence, ancient wisdom, the ontological coaching model, and a powerful process that allows leaders to rediscover the natural leader within so that they can access passion, clarity, and breakthrough results. Now, I'm going to share with you one of the other fundamental principles in my book, and it's really the first principle. It's chapter 1. It's so fundamental to leadership that I put it as the first part of my book, and I felt that I was in good company because the Army Leadership Manual did the same. If the Army believes that this is relevant to leadership, we probably can trust that there are some important things that we can all learn from this. And the principle is very simple, but it's counterintuitive. Be, know, do. Notice that it's not know, do, be, or do, know, be. It's be, know, do. Only by this self-development will you become a confident and competent leader of character. Character and competence, the be and the know, underlie everything a leader does. So becoming a leader involves developing all aspects of yourself. This is really quite profound because I think in our society we oftentimes focus so much on what we know and on what we're doing. We think we may get around to being someday or not. But you see, the results that you're capable of producing are a direct descendant of how you are being and who you are being. To do is not the same as to be. I love this quote from Marcel Proust. 9/10 of the ills from which intelligent people suffer spring from the intellect. And this is what I've seen over and over again with my high-achieving, high-performing, successful clientele. They began to believe and were trained and educated and reinforced for believing that they really were their thoughts and their actions. And at some point, they reached a critical level where that fundamental paradigm would not work to get them to the next place. Why is that? I'm going to show you the science behind it next. What's really happening is that in our body and in the mind, which are connected obviously, the autonomic nervous system consists of 2 components. We are predominantly wired and living in the sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is where our left brain operates from. It exudes willful action. It's where logical, rational, linear thinking resides. It's what we engage in when we're awake. And it's also the part that's dominant when we're stressed. Worst of all, it is that it accumulates stress. So let's just call our sympathetic nervous system the acting and doing part of our brain. Here's the part you may not know, that you were designed to have a counter to that, a balance, and that is in the parasympathetic nervous system. This is the part of our brain that is active when we are consciously relaxed. It is the right brain part of our bodies. It allows us to be receptive, intuitive, to access visualization. High degrees of creative thinking come from the right brain. And here's the other really exciting part, is that when the body and the mind are relaxed, it is impossible to feel anxiety because they can't coexist at the same time. It's one or the other. So we're going to call this the feeling and being part. Now, here's where I have seen and experienced personally how people have gotten stuck. Without the balancing from the parasympathetic nervous system, we develop unconscious habits, and our unconscious habits produce fear, anger, and reactivity, minute to minute and day to day, which over time promotes chronic stress. We have residual tension without the counterbalancing, opposing part of relaxation. And I don't mean going on a vacation 1 week a year. Any stress that's left over, your body eats. And the toxic leftovers are misery and ultimately illness. Stress accumulates and blocks us at the physical, mental, and emotional levels and creates dis-ease. So when you go home tonight, I want you to tell your family that you were instructed on your Kauffman webinar today to go out of your mind. Because going ahead of your mind is a good thing. Why am I telling you this? Because the body's innate state is one of homeostasis. Your body was designed for well-being. And when you operate with polarity, that is the ability to balance the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems, you will experience inner harmony, balance, access to wisdom and higher intelligence, and the highest form of leadership. You see, choice is the way out. Living in chronic alert, fear, and stress and reactivity is a choice. By using this way of living, you promote excessive use of your beta brainwaves, which are unhealthy. That is highly activated sympathetic nervous system. Your alpha brainwaves are activated when you sleep. But if you were to develop a deep relaxation practice for yourself and engage and retrain the neural wiring in your brain and body, you will be able to experience theta and delta brainwaves. That is the highly engaged state of the parasympathetic nervous system. Now the good news is that the polarity is already there. It naturally lives inside of us. It's not outside. You don't have to go get it. You don't have to go pay for it. You don't have to become a monk to do it. You just need to learn the tools and commit to the practice and the engagement that will result in this huge shift. And you need to work on eliminating habits that force us to the ends of the polarity scale. Therefore, allowing yourself to learn to be rather than just to do and to know. So in the Step-Up Leader model, which is an integrative model, we focus on being and feeling as the precedent for acting and doing. My clients know that we focus on getting them to the state of understanding where their body needs to be, what moods and emotions they need to be in, and then the language will come. We express ourselves when we are in a calm-centered present state to have the effective conversation we need to have. We know how to disengage in other people's reactive conversations because we can hold our own strong centered presence. When you learn to do this, everything about your leadership will be taken to a new level. This system is enhanced by timeless and effective Eastern wisdom traditions. And you learn to access this moment of choice, becoming the witness and not the judge, through a centering practice. So what I'd like to do now is share with you a couple of short case histories. These are just a few that I thought you would be able to relate to of how we've engaged with real-life examples of clients who've utilized this system and how it has impacted them as leaders. So let's take Laura. She's an equity partner in a 500-person organization. And after years of working in a difficult environment, she realized that she was really failing. She was outside the herd. She felt vulnerable. She knew she wasn't inspiring the trust and confidence that she needed to have from her colleagues. And her ability to make rain, to produce new business, which was where the revenue drivers were in her organization, it had disappeared. It was gone. She knew something was wrong, and it was critical that she fix it. But she didn't know what to do about it. She had no idea. So here's the intervention. We explored her emotional and mood space in anticipation of the challenging conversations that she was having. We explored her habits, the ways that she typically engaged. I like to call that her default. And not surprising, her default after several years of these particular habits was one of nervousness, anxious, pressured, fearful, etc. How likely would it be that she would be able to engage in powerful and effective conversations with prospects when she was in that particular space? If 93% of her credibility and influence come from her moods, emotions, and body, pretty darn unlikely. So what we did is we began to shift her repeatedly to a body stature and mood and emotional space of curiosity, exploratory, being flexible, being a learner, engaging in different ways. And this was very uncomfortable for her in the beginning. It was so new and different, she didn't really want to trust it. But over time, with small practice fields in the coaching conversations and then in the engagement at work, she began to discover that this was exactly what she needed. She was alleviating her underlying recurrent patterns and habits from the stress that kept her from being her natural leader. And she had developed the ability to have a centering practice daily and before any high-stakes conversations. So these are some quick results that happened after only 6 sessions. She brought in the largest piece of business in her career from an existing client, and her year-end revenue increased by over $500,000 from what it had been the previous year. She's pretty darn happy. Let's look at Brad. Brad was really on the way up. He was newly promoted from a general manager to a CEO of a 200-person manufacturing company that he had been in for quite some time, so he knew the business from the ground up. But he felt ill-prepared to lead versus manage. He was inexperienced as a leader. He knew everybody's jobs inside and out, so it was so much easier for him to tell people what to do rather than to lead them. The company was also going through a major reorganization due to aggressive financial goals that were created by the new owners. So one of the first tasks that was required was for him to fire 2 long-standing unqualified employees. Here are the interventions that we undertook right away. We identified the critical priorities for his immediate attention. The foundational element was to help him develop a practice of centering so he could begin to lead from the place of a strong centered presence. We worked on integration in his body. Somatic is from the Greek word soma, which means body. So we helped him learn how in his body he could support better communication and listening and holding that space for others who were more challenged than he was. This was the practice of learning how to have effective conversations. We also introduced and trained him in how to coach as a leader, and he learned how to facilitate challenging conversations with employees at all levels of the organization. So as a result of the initial part of our engagement, he terminated effectively 2 long-standing employees, very, very effectively. He recruited a top talent CFO who has been transformational in the organization. He made multiple personnel changes for more effective talent utilization. He created and is currently overseeing a new company marketing platform that's driving new business results. He has made centering a habit for himself and is beginning to engage with others in the organization and teaching them the tools. And he reports better communication with his spouse as a result of all of the above. And as a result, his company is now on track for meeting the very high financial growth expectations of its new owners. So let's review. The pathway to stepping up involves an awareness of the importance of being before doing. Breaking through those barriers and habits that perhaps got you to where you are that might be preventing you from getting to where you need to go next. Learning to create a centered presence for yourself. Having the practices to create new neural pathways in the brain so that they become your habit and your comfort zone. And then connecting all of these to your vision for where you need to go and to strategic actions so that you're able to impact these things in a very structured and effective way. The other way that this is incorporated is through learning to intend and declare. And last, and certainly not least, is accountability. All steps are necessary if you are going to sustain the gains of what you learn at the cognitive level and put them into practice in your way of leading. Now, I love this next slide because this explains why having an accountability portion built into your leadership training is so critical. Your likelihood of successfully completing a goal is 10% if you hear an idea. It goes up to 25% if you consciously decide to adopt it. And that number will grow to 40% if you decide when you'll do it. It goes up to 50% if you plan how you'll do it. Another 15% if you commit to someone else that you will do it. But look at this. 95% if you have a specific accountability appointment with the person to whom you've committed. And right then and there, you see the importance of having accountability built in to what you do in leadership. Because you will move your likelihood of successfully completing the goals that are in front of you from 40 or 50% up to 90% in no short order. So in conclusion, I want to leave you with questions because I'm a coach and that's what coaches do. We ask questions. Are you acting from a centered presence or from reactive habits? Are you leading from the 93% or the 7%? Is your leader more often a witness or a judge? Does your natural leader get to the root? Are you truly living and leading your natural leader birthright? And lastly, how would your leadership and life be different if you lived here? Well, I hope that you can imagine it because I already imagine it for you. Step Up leaders embrace an integrative approach for accessing the natural leader within you and rediscover your passion, clarity, and exceptional results. I hope you would join me in stepping up now.